And the stage is yours, Steve.
Thank you. So today I'm going to talk about task publishing in Microsoft Teams. This is something that's been around for a short while in the product. And I think it's one of those apps where if you've not used it yet, then you might be surprised about how simple it is to actually get it deployed out there with users. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Steve Goodman. I'm a principal technology strategist at a company in the UK, Content and Cloud, part of a bigger group across the Nordics now as well, focused on Teams, Exchange, and various bits of Microsoft 365. And one of the things I really like doing is talking to the businesses that we work with to understand some of their problems. And this is just one of those areas where what I've seen is it's that thing that tips us over from why buying Teams licensing for retail, first line workers, manufacturing, all of those use cases where they never bought any licensing at all for people, as one customer said it, wanting to buy licenses down to even the glass collectors. This is the thing that can help tip it over the edge. All of this stuff that comes as part of Teams, which is part of the suite, when you deploy it successfully, then you can start cherry picking where these use cases fit. So we're going to talk about what it is, and can you just roll it out? Is it there? Is it just a button I press and it's ready to use? Are people using it already? We'll find out. And usually there's some sort of planning we need to do as well. What do we need to think about before we get started with it? And once we've configured this, what's it like to use as a worker as well? I should warn you in advance that in my tenant, there seems to be some sort of a problem. So when I get to the demo, you'll see how much effort I've made to set everything up. And unless Microsoft fix whatever it is, you'll only see a little bit of the demo, but most of it. So you'll see almost everything, unless the magic that is the cloud all comes together. But first, what is it? So if you're familiar with Microsoft 365, which if you're at the Teams Community Day, I hope you are, then you'll know that To Do, which is that personal task management thing. You know, I use it for my shopping. I use it for everything, really, planning my day at work. And that is stored in Exchange. Then you've got what's Planner, Microsoft 365 group attached tasks that are good for perhaps making a Kanban board or having a list of things that you might use on an agile style project. You'll see lots of people use it to organize mini unstructured projects within their team. And you can have multiple plans within a team itself these days. And apparently in the future, you'll be able to have plans without even teams or Microsoft 365 groups. But you've got those two separate things. And often when you're working with teams, then it has that view of the thing you want rather than the application that delivers it. So for the calendar button, it doesn't say Exchange. And if you want to call someone, it doesn't say Skype, even if it uses Skype under the hood in various places. And much like that, then tasks is how Teams are presented, how To Do and Planner is presented in Teams. It brings all of that together in one place. Now, if you wanted to build apps on top of that, then there's some key use cases. And one of those is task distribution. So one of the most common things that you might find in a business today where they've got lots of sites all over the place and they've got lots of things people must do is talking to a retailer today and a bar last week, similar use cases. They have auditing applications and they've got to either upgrade them, replace them, make them work with Teams, or they could use some of the applications inside it like this. So if you need to, in the central headquarters, send out a list of tasks and duplicate that across every shop. So everybody needs to do a stop check this Friday, then send that out and it copies it to every single place, every single store in your group. And then you can see, has it been assigned to anybody yet? Have they done it yet? What's the progress on it? And then report centrally back. That's perfect because you couldn't really just do that with Planner on its own unless you added everybody into a single plan and then made many, many, many tasks. So it simplifies this whole process. So as perhaps an auditor, I might go create a task and then I press a button, choose where it's going to go, and then it flows out to the rest of the organization. And then it pops up on their devices and says, got a new task to do, get busy. And that's quite a valuable thing. And it's neat how it effectively just works incrementally on top of that tasks in Teams feature that's already there. But you've got to have a little bit of setup done first. And some of that you might have already done, some of that you might still have to do. So what do we need to do? So I would suggest that before you do anything, then you think about how you're going to get ready for this. So my biggest worry with most customers with Teams is them not really thinking through things first. So you do need to think of a hierarchy, and I'll show you an example once so you can understand what this means. But it's not a direct mirror of the organization's hierarchy. So it's not the CEO's office and then the support function, the group function, the stores function, and then the hierarchy that sits under that. It's aligned to how tasks flow, the hierarchy of how there's a phrase for it in the UK that I won't use here, but where the less great work is shoveled over the edge and then flows downwards. And it's that task or that reporting structure where people who are not necessarily managers of one another can assign tasks. So the marketing team said we need displays. They're not in charge of the store managers, but they can throw tasks over the fence for them to do. And they'll have the support of the management teams of the organization to allow that to get done. It's that structure that we need to implement when we're thinking about the team targeting hierarchy that goes into place. Now, all of this is Microsoft 365 group and team related for obvious reasons. So you need to have a look and see whether you've already got the right structure in place. If you haven't, and you're struggling to justify why, then this is one of those things to throw into it. Because what you don't want to do, ideally, is create a whole new structure for this. So think about how, if you've got nothing in place, think about how else Teams is going to be used. So if we're thinking about a store structure, then you're going to have those teams that sit in headquarters or regional offices, and they are likely to have teams. So a team that is for the marketing team, or a team for the northern area managers, and then you might have a team for each store. And what are the common concerns will be, well, do we have a special team for tasks, or a special team for shifts, and a special team for the assistant manager and the manager, and perhaps the area manager as well? Probably not. You probably want to get one team and then have a subset of that for things like private channels, and do all that collaboration, use it for shifts, use it for other applications that you bring in, power apps that are loaded into each store to be used, all of that stuff. Perhaps you're going to use walkie-talkie. Again, see if you can come up with a structure for Teams that's going to satisfy all of those use cases as well. So you don't look at this and go, wow, we've got it in place for task publishing. Now we've got to create a whole bunch of new teams, because it's, obviously in these kind of scenarios, you might have 300 stores. You might then end up with 900, 1,200 teams by just thinking about things in a different way, or being very tactical about it. So it's worth getting bits like that right. So I see a question already. Is it normal that the task saves the attachments directly in the root share of the Sharepoint online document library from the Teams using tasks? Yes, that is normal. It's obviously not ideal. That is because under the hood, Planner is attached to Microsoft 365 Groups. Microsoft 365 Groups is attached to SharePoint Teams. So it does flow that way. You attach it directly to a plan or a task item, and then it's saving it to the root of the document library. So again, I'll explain it now. Actually, it's the second time I've explained this today, actually. The way that you work with documents, think about that end-to-end story, right? So if we're thinking about the task publishing scenario where we are going to distribute an attachment effectively alongside the task. What is the life cycle of that document? So with a marketing team, and we've got a new flyer that is going out to all the stores. They're saying, in England, Plan B is over. Go knock yourselves out. Take your masks off. Cough over each other if you want, or whatever. But perhaps they made a lovely flyer for that. The first version of that said all those stupid things. The second version of that on review took off the stupid bits and was a bit more serious. Then the graphic designer added in some logos and all their stuff, and it's ready to go. But it's still the same document, right? So it was probably created into the team. It's in the channel for promotions. It's in that the files tab under there. So it's already in that subfolder. When you create the task, then that's what you're going to attach to it. So it's already going to be in the right place if you're following that flow of modern work in Microsoft 365, where there's a single version of the truth. Need that updated when it's attached to this, then it's going to flow through, right? So there's ways of working, and there's a way that should work theoretically. You create a new planner tab in Teams. It's attached to your promotions channel. You would think, right, that if you add an attachment, it'll put it in the right place. Oh, it doesn't. Well, it's not necessarily a workaround. It's perhaps thinking about the way that people go and create documents. Because do you want them to download that document from the SharePoint library and then upload a new copy and attach it to the task? Probably not. That's not necessarily a natural way of working in Microsoft 365. So that's the question answered from my perspective. You may not agree. So if you don't, then feel free to tell me a better approach, because I am all ears, even though you can't see them. So get that structure right, information architecture, and you can see, even from that explanation, that what we really want is a team that works for everything that you do in it, right? So you want that in place before you do anything. The hierarchy, again, is going to follow this decision-making structure for how work flows. So that is likely to be different to your team structure. So if we take a step back and think about teams more widely, then there may be other structures in place. There could be hub sites connecting other teams. There's much more to think about it than this. So if you're starting on this journey, because task publishing is the low-hanging fruit for you, it's the thing that people are going to go, yes, well done. You've done an excellent job here. Then just take that step back, think about the future. You don't want to perhaps be in a situation where you say, I know we did all that, but I've got to delete all these teams and create them again, or you're going to have duplicates. So I know I hammered that home. I won't do any more. So first of all, just go create all that team structure. And you also might want to do something. Actually, you might not need to do this now. And I left this in because it is rolling out. It's in my tenant now. Microsoft are rolling out a first line worker policy by default in tenants. But that might not reflect your actual licenses in place. It may be that your store managers have E3 licenses because they've got PCs out the back. It may be that you simply don't want the mix of first line worker apps that will be deployed, like shifts as well. And therefore, an app setup policy is going to be the right thing to add into the mix, because what that's going to do is crucially allow you to create a curated view or list of the applications in Teams that people have and see. The reason why that's important is Teams can be overwhelming with all the applications that it's got. I've shown perhaps comms leads, a manufacturing firm, Teams, and until we get to that point and demo it, I've had feedback where they've said, oh, that's a lot of stuff though. How will people know what to find? If any of you have been to Microsoft 365 long enough, you'll remember the old what tool to use when diagrams and so on, and the different circles showing use this for this, use that for that, a pie chart with different tools in Microsoft 365, so much stuff. So you want to curate the experience. So it might be they see the comms stuff. This is a conversation that involves everybody that's dealing with this. So not just your task stuff, but it might be that they can see shifts. It might be that they see, as I say, comms site tasks, walkie-talkie, a few other bits and pieces. It might be a custom power app that you want deployed to them as well. But so they can open up Teams and open it, and the thing is there. They can just press the button and see what they need. So let's go in and create these. So I'm now in the Teams admin center, and I've already created these teams, as you might expect, because you wouldn't want to watch me creating all of these by hand. So I've got a couple in here. I've got my northern and southern area managers. There's some in the middle of the country who will no doubt be arguing over what's north and south. But I'll leave that to them because I've decided that Manchester is in the north, Milton Keynes is in the south. I think that's about right. And then we've got places which, over in the continents, as we say, you may not be fully aware of. We've got Edinburgh, we've got London, which is a big city down in the south, and Southampton, which is also in the south too. So we've got all those in place. They're created, and the people working in those stores, the managers of those stores, are already added to those. They're quite simple at the moment. They've just got the standard channels in because we're just keeping things very, very simple. We've also got some other teams as well, but they're not going to be relevant to our team's hierarchy, so they won't need to be included. But it's important to note that we've got a few, such as Viva Learning, management team. They're not going to be part of that publishing hierarchy. They're for different purposes, and we'll see those a little bit later on as we set things up. So the other part of that is the apps. So Teams apps, you've got setup policies down under here, and my first line worker policy, that's the first time I've seen it in my tenant today as I prepared for the demo. That's got some of these apps in already by default. You could can't change these because it's a default policy. Microsoft think shifts actually is the thing that you need. But I've also pre-created a policy, pressing add and then calling it stores, where I've pre-installed and pinned apps. So if you're not familiar with this, then I'll briefly explain it. So we've got two options. We can install an app or pre-install an app for a user. Now, by pre-installing the app for the user, we gain the ability to make sure that it's already there, but it won't be top of mind for them. It won't be the first thing that they see. It will be when you see the ellipses at the bottom after the pinned apps, you'll see it in those lists. So they can go into it very easily. They don't need to go and add it from the app store in Teams. If we want to make sure that people can see it, then we pin it. And by pinning it, then we can decide where it should show. So we can move it up and down the order. So we can say, this is extremely important. We want it to be front and center before chat or Teams. You may find that the calendar is less useful to some users and wish to remove it altogether. But for our purposes, what we want to do is make sure tasks is there so they can see it. Built-in Teams app effectively will be there for all of the store workers. When we've done that, then, and this is where, and Tom, if you were in the last session, was talking about the licensing side of things, where there are tools to make this easier, or you can use PowerShell to make this easier as well. But then we want to assign it to people. So if we wanted to assign it to a Monica in here, I will assign it to Monica. Maybe I'll assign it to Russ, brother and sister that work in our tenant. For those who know. And that will then, within a few hours, enable itself on their clients. When they open up Teams on mobile, on desktop, everything will be done. So we've got the pre-work done, and we're kind of ready for things to move on, because like everything, break those changes into small chunks. Our teams are there. Our app is pinned in the right place. They can use it for personal tasks, planner tasks. They can organize their lives in it now. Now we can go and have what might be a long conversation with the organization to understand what this hierarchy would look like. So remember, it's how the tasks will be published. But as well as that, then we might want to filter tasks. So perhaps if we're publishing to stores in this scenario, then we might want to be able to filter by the type of store. So if we want stuff to go first to flagship stores, then we might publish those tasks to there and then duplicate the list and then publish to the rest of them as we go along. Or we might have different parts of the group that we want to do this as well. Or there might be ones that we test things out on first. So we could have some filters there to make it easy. And then there's the planner concept of buckets of tasks. So the buckets of tasks allows us to make sure that if there's multiple departments, for example, perhaps there's a marketing department, health and safety, auditing department, and they're all feeding their tasks in, then it allows them to categorize those based on perhaps where the taskers came from. So that will show us a bucket, a list of tasks for those, or the purpose of it. So in that shop scenario, it could be something that is out in the back office that needs to be done, or it might be something on the shop floor. It might be a routine task that must be done that relates to everything. It could be something to do with, as I say, health and safety and so on. So we want to think about those buckets where we'll place those. And once we've had our plan agreed for how this is going to work, then the next part is to create a mapping file. And this is where we're showing that relationship to Teams, where we're defining it, and then we load that into Teams via PowerShell. And that's the easy bit. It's not, don't worry, it's not 50 commands. Actually, it's one to check it worked. But it does involve getting things right in Excel. It's a CSV file that we're going to load in. But it is simple to do because, like everything, technical bits are usually a lot easier if you've got all the planning in place. So I've made our example hierarchy here. So you've seen my teams, you've seen what we've got in our environment. You know the scenario, and as I said, this doesn't reflect the decision-making structure of the organisation, but it does reflect the task flow, where our two departments at the top of the hierarchy, health and safety and marketing, are able to send work down through the areas into different parts of the organisation. And to make sure that we can pick and choose different groups of stores within this structure, then we can add one or more different types of information as well. So I've got a store type, but I could have several of these. So I could have 3, 4, many fields, which I'll be able to pick and filter on. And I've decided I've got store type flagship and Edinburgh and London as the capital cities of Scotland and England. Will have those flagship stores for our business. So it's fairly straightforward, isn't it? You know, we've got that flow down where the task can come from. You've got these two at the top. So they're both equally able to create tasks and say, this goes to everyone in the north, everyone in the south. They can't assign tasks to each other, but they've certainly got the same priority to do that. And of course, you could have layers above this as well and make this complex if you needed to have different structures within this for how tasks flow into different areas of the business. Perhaps it's a large group and there's different countries with different marketing teams and so on. But we're keeping it relatively simple. I think 1 at the top would be too simple. 2, I think that represents the most common scenario that we'll see this used for, because we'll be attempting to hopefully solve 2 different teams' problems at least when we start using this. Now I've got our task buckets as well. As you can see, as people create these task lists, they can assign tasks within the lists to different buckets. So people in the northern area managers, they can send some back office tasks, perhaps do the end of quarter or end of month reporting, make sure that the tills all match up for the stock in the back room. Marketing teams can send out the promotions, and health and safety can make sure that we're good and we're compliant. And we put up all of our notices to make sure people act in a safe way in our stores. So we've got a fairly simple structure, right? So we've got task buckets, and if we were to align this to a planner, then you would effectively have those same buckets cut the same way on screen. So you can imagine it's very, very much the same thing. So let's go and make this happen then. Now, I've already went into PowerShell, but what I should warn you about is You need to have the right module. So I've got the preview module loaded. So the Teams PowerShell preview module is the only one at the moment that has this team targeting hierarchy status command inside it. So when you go and install that module, then you've got the preview button. Because I use both, then I've got this saved as a module into a folder that I'm importing manually. So make sure preview module before you do this. And when we get started, clarity, clear my screen, to get team. So we're going to need the display name for the team, and we're going to need the group ID as well for the team too. So I'm going to do get team, and I can, if I want to, let's have a look at what the output gives us. It should be all of them. That's working, great. So we could select just the ones that we want. So just the fields we want, display name and group ID. For simplicity, I'm just going to export this as a CSV. There to be a commented out line at the top for the object type, so hyphen no type information with that. And if I fire this up in, then what we should see is the raw output from this. So I've got a lot of stuff I don't need, right? So I'm going to delete some of these rows. As I say, what I could have done is just select the object that I needed and then just select these columns from the list. But it's simple enough to do it this way. So I'm just going to change the formatting around because I'm going to have a display name and I've got the group ID. Now the group ID is going to need to follow the format. So the Microsoft documentation does cover this for setting up, but group ID is the team ID, and it has to be the team ID. You also need to know who your parent is. Not so great for some folks, but in the context of Teams, this is the parent team. And like people, you can have more than one parent. In our case, some of these will have two. Some of them will just have one, sadly. And then we've got some of our additional fields. So in addition to this, we've got the freeform fields that we're going to use to filter on. So the freeform field here that I'm using is my store type. And inside this, I've got the stores that I want. So Edinburgh is a flagship. But you didn't think you're going to be watching a man messing with Excel, did you, when you joined this session? Just watch the chat. If I'm boring you as well with Excel, then I do have here's one I prepared earlier that I can show you as well. And actually, to speed things up, I'm going to paste things in that I've already got here. My task bucket. So hashtag promotions, that will show as a promotions bucket without the hashtag, but the hashtag signifies that that's going to be a bucket. So we're just adding those columns in which teams will interpret the right way. Now, I'm going to go through and remove things we don't want in our hierarchy. So we do not need Viva Learning Content Management Team or Store Management. So I'll remove those rows, and then the parent names. We're going to do this so it reflects our hierarchy. Just for your benefit, so you can see this before I do it. I'll pop this back on screen so you can see our publishing hierarchy. So I've got, I'm going to assign North to Edinburgh, Manchester and Durham, and South to London, Milton Keynes and Southampton, which I just wrote in there to catch you out. South, right. Of course, the South's parent is not the South, nor is it the North. Marketing, again, was at the top of our tree. As was health and safety, Edinburgh is in the north, Manchester is in the north, and Durham is in the north. So let's add South, Milton Keynes. It's like a tour of Great Britain. So South, and I'm missing one as well. Now there we go, all right. So now in our hierarchy, you will remember we've got the marketing and health and safety at the top of the tree, so nothing gets added in for them. However, they own in this their children, north and south, which will flow down under them. So I'll paste in marketing, and then I'll put a semicolon here. Copy that to the north, and health and safety. I'm going to get the text for that there, and then just paste that at the end. And that is our hierarchy. So marketing, health and safety, no parents. They have came from nothing, and then our areas owned by the south, and then those ones in the middle, the south and the north, owned by those two teams at the top. The team IDs are in here. They help with the permissioning and creation of this, and we've got our flags, store type promotions, and so on. That's saved, and now we can load it in. So we've got two sets of commandlets that we use here. So we've got, show you first of all, set team targeting hierarchy file path. That's an absolute file path to that file that we saved and created. So C users Steve team list 72.csv. Hit enter, and it might break. There we go, and it sends a request. Now, unlike many commandlets, it doesn't give us an immediate output. So what we need to do, because this is effectively, it's called, from what you can see, it looks like it's a graph operation. We're going to do get team targeting hierarchy status, hit enter. If you do this many times, it is worth changing the number, because you'll see the last updated and modified, but the file name, for example, is shown, so we can see it's successful, and we know it's definitely that file that we published. That's uploaded our hierarchy, and it will take a little time for this to become real and actually apply itself to Teams. So let's have a look at the user experience. So we've got this in Teams. That was it. That was the PowerShell to enable it, right? Got our Teams, got the app setup policy in place, made a CSV file, and we've loaded the CSV file into Teams. It is there. It is ready to use. That's it. That's all the setup. It's actually nice to have something in Teams where you must set it up as an admin before people can start using it. But that's not too complex. You know, it's arguably something that doesn't even need an admin user interface to. It's that straightforward. Now, the user experience itself is fairly straightforward. Now, this doesn't require a new application to be deployed separately to that tasks app. As I said, it's the tasks app. It will self-enable for a user at the right point in time. So once it's in place, then you're going to have two scenarios for how people are going to use this, right? You're going to have the people that are possibly, and this has been one of those common tropes through the last few years, possibly sitting at home in their office, thinking up all their new promotions and so on. And then they'll be publishing these tasks out from a desktop PC. And those will then arrive in the hands of the frontline workers. They'll get a pop-up on their phone. Oh, another promotion. Better get on it. Can I sign this too? So we've got that the two cases really, where you've got the people who are going to be walking around and they're going to use this on mobile, and you might have a manager, assistant manager, perhaps in the back office using the machines too, perhaps using a PC. So we've got two sides to this, and we're going to have a look at them now. Here we go. So some of this has got things I've done earlier to make sure that one, everything works, and two, in the hope that the Teams issues that appear to be in my tenant right now are gone. Now, what we can do is in here we can go and check first. So if you've created this as a test, before you do anything else, you might want to go into those ellipses and choose this option. Am I enabled for publishing? Now, what this is going to do is validate that the user you've assigned this to, which could be you for testing, has all the right things in place. So if you're playing the usual game of testing out some configuration and you're wondering, is it there yet? Is it working yet? Then press this button and it's going to tell you. So is it set up? Yes. Am I part of a team? Yes. Can I publish lists and can I receive them? Yes. Brilliant. Fantastic. So we're able to use it. That's all we needed to know. I mean, it doesn't give us logs, granted, but it's pretty good. I've created a couple here already that are published. So I'll show you some of these quickly first before I show you how to make one. Now, what we've got is I've created a couple. So I've got a campaign for February 2022. That's going to go out, and you can see there's some tasks that need to be done in preparation for that. So as a marketing person at Contoso grocery store, then I want to make sure that in each shop, the store manager first of all orders the prints that are going in the window displays. They can get those done for the size they need based on the window size in their shop, right? So that's a task for them to do, not me. I know that they've got rotating displays. I want those updated, so it's got my promotion on it, and I know that because it's a promotion and there's a discount, then when someone walks around the shop and looks at the shelf, I want them to be able to see something saying half price now. So I want them to do that too. And those displays that they order in, I don't want them putting them out now. I want them to do them on the 1st of Feb because it's the February promotion. So I've created those simple tasks for them to do. And this is where if I've got perhaps a PowerPoint that's going to go on the display, then that's where I'd go and add that in as an attachment. Now, I'm not editing that. That's a published one, so I can't add it to it now. But you can see this is where you would add that information. If you've used Planner, then this should be familiar to you. That's a published one, and we're going to create a new one in a moment. But then on the right-hand side, then we've got the reporting side of things. So we can see, and it's not in real time, but it's good enough. So it might take some time, 20 minutes, 5 minutes in some cases, maybe an hour for the status to change for these, where it's pulling back a view of what's happened to these tasks. So we can see if it's 100 stores, 50 is assigned, 50 stores have assigned the task, how many have completed them. And then we can drill down even further under that as well. So we can go into these reports to better understand how this has been assigned, who it's been assigned to, and get that full visibility of our campaign as well. So we can know exactly what's happening and where. So if we know that it hasn't been assigned in Edinburgh, then we might need to send them a Teams message and ask them to look into this, please, with some urgency. So basic reporting, drill down reporting. Of course, it is Planner, therefore you could build additional reporting on the top of this and automate some of it as well, if you like. In its core use case, though, we can choose how we work with this. So I'm going to publish from the north, and I'm going to have, what have I got? I'm going to have a health and safety check. And I'll create that. And again, this is just Planner, so I'm going to keep this really simple. Trying to think of health and safety that is not something that we're always talking about and seeing on the news. Health and safety check. Check for staplers with loose, sharp staples. Something I always check if I'm working in a shop. And I want that done today. And I think it's critically urgent because I've had reports that 3 people have cut their fingers with those. So I'm going to drop that into the compliance bucket. That's all I want to do. I'm going to publish that out. And now I've got this capability then, as I'm at the northern level, then I can pick either just the flagship stores, in which case there's Edinburgh listed. I can selectively pick the stores. I know this is particularly a problem for folks in Manchester, maybe, so I'll just publish them. Now let's get everybody to go and do this check. And once we're happy, we're going to publish one task to 3 teams. We can press publish. And this doesn't actually take a long while. So I've tried this for about 60, 70 teams, across several different regions in the hierarchy, and on a good day, right about at this moment, then many mobile phones would be pinging with the new task. Let's see if ours is. There's my mobile. Let's refresh. Oh, there we go. Now, as I said, some of this doesn't work right now in my tenant, but it is set up. That's why I preset this up beforehand, and I think it is a transient issue because I set this up days ago with the actual hierarchy. So I think it's a transient issue in Teams. If it works, bonza. Now tapping on that should show me the task. In my tenant, it's not showing me the task. What I would be showing you right now, or planned to show you, is me editing the task and then assigning it to some poor person that works for me as a manager in my team. But we get the notification, the ping on the phone, we open it up, and straight away we can go into that task, which will normally load, and it shows us that, and then we can assign it. If we look at this over back on the mobile side, the desktop side, then we get that same view in tasks over here. So if it's if it's the one that's not on mobile, then they will see the same set of notifications for those tasks. Those will go through. The plan is there. The link is correct, I should tell you, and it did work. However, it couldn't load it. So you may have briefly seen as that loaded, it said that couldn't load the tasks and then had an error. But normally that would take us straight into the plan itself. And going into task by planner, then we'll see the published tasks and they'll be in that list, which is actually there normally. So from a user's perspective, what they're seeing is a task list, a normal planner task list with these, and they've been added for them. Now, it is good because it is actually a two-way street. So perhaps I publish this and I get a call from a very angry manager who says, yes, I admit I scratched my finger on a staple. There's no need to get everybody to check across every single store about this. This is so embarrassing. Everybody's joking about me now. You can unpublish that and take back your over-eager health and safety checks and even delete those. Those will be removed from view for the users. And over on mobile, you'll see that recall the task list. Unlike email recall, this works, and it isn't a source of amusement for folks. It just actually works, and of course we can delete that. And we've got the ability, of course, to go into these lists, and we can choose to edit the list as well if we need to add things to it rather than create a new one. It's pretty straightforward. You make a list, publish the list, you can bring it back and delete it, or you can edit it and republish the changes to it. So it's pretty straightforward from a user perspective, which is extremely good because, apps that are hard to use, are not the way forward for anybody. If it's not quite suited to your needs, then also remember that Teams comes with app templates, and some of these cover some of that ground, like audits and incident reporting and so on. But they don't have that ability that task publishing does to be able to essentially create a list of things that must be done and then duplicate them and send them out individually to all of your stores. So it's really good for what it can do. Works on mobile, so it's going to work on your Android devices, tablets, obviously Windows, PCs, Macs, anything with a supported web browser. As you can see here, I'm using Edge, as you might expect, and the supported mobile and desktop clients too. So it's pretty straightforward. You should definitely consider using it. Often when we're thinking about first-line workers, then other MVPs, I think Vesa has said on a podcast he did with me, one of the things that gets people using using Teams, especially for first-line workers, is having something that they must do to go there. So bringing across an existing app or an existing process like this, into Teams. It's the reason why they'll do it. It's the reason why that they've got for opening it, and then they might engage in other things, look at the communications, some of your other goals for getting people to adopt Teams when they don't necessarily have a reason to go there to look at the company news, for example. That you're driving that usage through giving them something that they must access and they need to do their job. So it's definitely worth considering, because first line can always be quite a difficult one. So in summary, we're 1 minute over, so I'll be very brief. Use things that exist where you can. If they don't, then take the opportunity to think about your information architecture for Teams, plan that out properly first, or at least get that wider view. Keep things as simple as you can. Like everything, you don't want too many options, otherwise people will actually get confused. Too many similar buckets for different teams. Don't design these by committee. Get everyone's input and then make an intelligent decision based on everybody's needs, right? And use the app setup policies to make sure that people see the things they need. If you're setting up an app setup policy for the first time, and it is for tasks, then you're going to have to consult with others because there may be differing opinions of what that curated view should look like. And as always with everything in Microsoft 365, don't expect people just to get things straight away. A lot of it is straightforward, especially to people interested in technology. But for many folks, they need a little bit of guidance on how to use this. What's in it for them if they use it this way? What are the benefits for the organization? What are the benefits for their working day? How will it make their lives easier compared to how it is now, and what problem is it solving, as well as the core, this is how you do it type guidance. Always useful to give. So I am done. I'm around for questions, obviously, as well. But I thank you all for listening and joining me today. I absolutely appreciate it. I see a very topical question related to my presentation here. Which microphone are you using? The quality is great. It's a Shure SM7B microphone, which is not Team certified. I do have a Team certified headset, I should add, kindly provided by Poly. Other manufacturers are available, which they provided because the last one broke and fell apart and stabbed me in the side of the head. So it's not an advert for them. And it's been useless on every Teams meeting today. So I'm using the big podcast mic that's plugged into a Rodecaster Pro, which is good for podcasts. But I usually keep it out of the way in meetings because if you're in a work meeting, don't want to distract people with a stupid big microphone, do you? So any other questions, especially around task publishing, before we go?
Doesn't seem like it.
Awesome topic. I was not aware that's even possible.
One thing I've struck with over the years is that use case for why it's good value to buy licensing for first line workers, because it's often so much of a challenge, and often the margins are so low, in retail or even in manufacturing in some cases as well. Distribution, another one where again low margin, and they've never traditionally bought licenses. This isn't the thing that's going to tip it, right? It's one of several. So, for example, I was talking to a customer about it before, and a few weeks ago, and their challenge is it's a lot of money to try and get Teams right. I mean, by a lot of money, they're thinking, 5 days of effort, 5 days of help to get it right for 70 bars. I think that's pretty good value, for most cases. But they've got to, they need to eke every bit of value out of this, because low margins and stuff like that. So, taking an approach of trying to understand what are all the other things that are on their list of challenges, apps that need replacing, apps that don't work on mobile, people aren't happy with, and so on. And then you can cherry pick the bits of Microsoft 365 where that works, and then focus first on things that are in the suite like this. Task publishing, I think a few other MVPs have done stuff on this already, but it's not widely deployed yet, or not as widely as I would expect yet.
I think we had Frank Harriers in August last year. He was talking about integrating apps into Teams, and he already said in his session that we will approach at some point the users, especially frontline workers and simple assistancy workers, for example, using only Word and Excel in the browser, will approach a point where they actually only need a Teams client to do all their work. And I think this topic perfectly fits into this point of view Frank told us about.
Yeah, it's that view that it's some customers. So some customers that I work with, if I said this, they'd laugh because of what Teams performance has been like. As the service scaled, as you throw more apps into it, because there's been things that have been said by Microsoft, like it's it's almost like the new operating system, or bring all your apps into Teams, and you have to approach that quite carefully, because if all they've seen is when they tried to use Teams to its full extent, it keeled over, or as I explained, or as I said, bring all your apps into Teams, the person at the customer end, this is a year ago, so things have improved with Teams since, I should say, when that's all very well and good. However, I can't do anything else on my PC now, as we've been in this meeting for an hour, and my PC is locked up and Teams is unresponsive apart from the meeting window. So I'm not sure we should do this yet. But obviously, you'll have heard in other sessions, I know with Tom's, he mentioned this, that there is the sort of new model of Teams, and there's also these incremental improvements. I'm obviously using Teams to demonstrate Teams to you with several windows open as well, with OBS capturing and sending the video around in the machine, and the machine hasn't keeled over. But if you are in back-to-back meetings and the laptop is getting hotter and hotter and hotter, then that can happen. And good solution to that is less meetings. I'll have a break in between them, but that's obviously not always practical. But it gives that perception that I can't use it for all my stuff, which isn't always the case, is it?
Yeah, but we can hope. Microsoft promised after the Electron client has vanished, the performance will get a lot better. So we still have hope.
Also,
yeah. One of the nice things that I've seen really is this idea that rather than us having to come and work all this out for a customer, or IT having to think up all of the clever stuff, but where there's common use cases like retail, manufacturing, then these apps that come into Teams, you can bring in apps and it's going to build that for you. So if we go and pick Power Apps, for example, then we've got the idea of application templates inside this, where we can add a template. And when we add an application template into the team, then it's actually going to make things a lot easier, because what we're doing is we're adding Power Apps, but we're using something off the shelf, an existing application inside the organization, rather than having to go through that process of coming up with something from scratch. So there's, I think I mentioned this earlier in the session, there's like store auditing apps already there and built that you can deploy, and it comes with sampled data, photos. Somebody inside the business could go deploy one of these into their team, and because it comes with like the sample data set, then they can immediately see how to use it and customize it a bit to their needs without even needing any help. The challenge that means for us in IT is we need to be better at knowing who's using what Power Apps and where our data is if people are going and doing these things. But that said, it it's better than expecting people to be citizen developers and do their full-time day job, in my view. Something simple that can take somebody who's a little bit enterprising, an afternoon at most of spare time to put in the right data, and then they look like the star. They go to, in our store scenario, the regional manager does it. He goes to his regional manager, an MD meeting, shows them this. They think he's amazing. IT don't get the credit, but we never do, right? Well, he didn't make it either. Microsoft did. But he gets the credit, or she gets the credit. They get the credit. And that the business succeeds, and they get all that great feeling of doing it. But they're never going to build that from scratch, because unless they can make the time, they're going to really struggle to. So I think that's a really positive development, as well as these more generic apps like the task publishing. And for me, it would be a choice of, is it going to be one of those apps, for example? Is it build something from scratch, or is it something we've already got in the suite? And if it can be something that's already there and it can be deployed widely across the org, then that makes a lot more sense, I think.
Okay, great. That was an awesome session. Thank you very much, Steve.